It was the middle of June 2018. I just received the call from my uncle in Nigeria. We concluded on travel arrangements for my trip home. I was finally going to see the house I built for my parents for their 50th wedding anniversary. This was a secret between my uncle and I. He supervised the construction from the foundation to the finished mansion. I have seen the pictures and I loved it. I sent approximately $97,000 from the States to my uncle in Nigeria for this mansion. It sits on 7,000 square meters with 6 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms and toilets, 2 kitchens, and 2 sitting rooms. I even had them structure a tomato garden for my mom at the backyard. I was going all out to make my parents the perfect mansion at our hometown. So here was the plan. I suggested to my dad that this Golden Jubilee be celebrated at our hometown since I would not be around. I convinced him that it should be celebrated around family. He tried convincing me to come back, but I told him work would not let me. I wanted my visit to be a surprise for them. My uncle was game and everything was perfect. On the 17th of June, I was at the airport with 3 bags, one containing my clothing, while the other 2 contain chocolates and sweets. I am not kidding. Lots and lots of chocolate. Virtually all what my relatives were interested in was chocolate, sweets, and cash. No one was interested in clothing or gadgets. You can imagine how the TSA stared at me suspiciously when they saw my luggage. But as a Niger boy, I anticipated this and dressed ridiculously colorful to the airport. It would be weird for both parties if I was picked out and questioned. My flight was boring as I slept for most parts. There was this thick, curvy lady in the flight that caught my attention. She was just perfect for me. She was not fully a BBW, but not on the slim side either. She was putting on headphones throughout the flight, and it seems she wanted to sleep badly. So I held my approach. It's not as if I was good at starting talks with ladies I just met. Maybe when we land in Nigeria, I would get the chance. We finally arrived at Murtala Mohammed Airport, Lagos. As we were checking out, all my senses were on high alert. This is Nigeria. You only survive if you think fast. It was like a game of chess between everyone and yourself. You have to anticipate people's motive. I put on my black shades and put on the strongest frown I had. Anyone who sees my scary face will think again. Yes, I think it is working. My game face was dope as hell. As I stepped into the arrival lounge, it was as if paparazzis were waiting for me. Like 20 people flooded towards me, saying, "Taxi, taxi, drop, island, Ikeja, Jalingo." They did not even acknowledge my strong face. They noticed a military man coming and they all dispersed. They had taken some of my chill away. I went into the VIP lounge to have a drink. It was a long flight after all. I picked up the car rental brochure and called. I was going to be driving myself here in Niger as I heard terrible stories about drivers being thieves and kidnappers. I wanted a Toyota and I wanted it to be an SUV. So I got a 2014 Toyota Prado, which was 60,000 naira per day. This is about $167 per day. My hometown is in Delta State, which was 300 kilometers away by flight and 450 kilometers away by road. I was going by road because I would be accompanied by a childhood friend. Fred, and we had a lot of catch-up to do. We were of course aware of the dangers on Nigerian roads, but we got encouragement from other friends who plied the same route. I drove to Fred's house at Lekki and was warmly welcomed. Unlike me, he had a wife and a 2-month-old daughter. Dinner was fun as we shared crazy stories. By 10 p.m, I went to the visitor's room to sleep. We planned to leave the next morning by 4 a.m. I woke up 1:20 a.m. to noise coming from the sitting room. It was Fred and his wife praying for our trip. As much as I wanted to join, sleep embraced me with her warm, soft bosom. I woke up again around 2:40 a.m. and heard Fred singing his baby back to sleep. At this point, I knew Fred would be too tired to drive, and I would take the responsibility to drive all through to my hometown. 3:50 a.m, we were both in the Prado, driving out of his compound. Our trip has started. Fred did not waste any time in getting into a comfortable position to sleep. I drove to a popular bus station. Our plan was to tag along a bus going to Delta State too. These buses had their own police escort. This way, we will be covered by the same police coverage. 5 a.m, we were still at the bus station. The bus needed 2 extra passengers before starting their trip. This was becoming annoying. I figured I would start the trip without them. I believed we would meet up with other buses on the way who would also have their own escorts. Fred was deeply asleep and I didn't want to bother him with my new plan, so I drove off. This Prado was awesome as it moved like a jet. I was just dashing past other cars on the road. The road felt relatively safe as I noticed numerous police patrols on the road. While I was feeling like the fastest man alive, 3 sport cars breezed past me. How? I was on 140 and these cars just passed me. I got excited and figured that if I can keep pace with these cars, we would be at Delta State in no time. But these cars were really fast. I tried matching up and was hitting 160 on the odometer. I could not go beyond 160, almost like the car had a speed limiter. But I maintained a fair distance. That was all the Prado could let me. And then it happened. I noticed the 3 cars suddenly pushing their brakes and swerving to avoid themselves. I was moving so fast that gently stepping on my brakes caused a violent swerve. I released the brake and hoped the car would drop its speed to something more controllable. At this point, Fred was awake. Poor Fred was confused. He looked at me terrified. We were literally now behind these 3 speedy cars, all still driving, but at a much slower rate. I would guess we were all doing a 60. I looked way ahead to investigate the issue and noticed 4 men wearing camouflage and holding rifles. I told Fred not to worry, as it was only a checkpoint. He then asked where the bus we were meant to be following was. I told him I stopped to pee, and so they were ahead. We suddenly heard screeching tires of the first sport car. We were shocked as this car sped past the men in camouflage. These men started shooting in all directions. The cars in front of me accelerated past the checkpoint. I was screaming to Fred, "Stay down, stay down." I also had my head down as I could hear bullets flying through the Prado. I just kept staring straight and floored the gas. The bullets were still coming. Our car suddenly hit something. I raised my head and saw it was one of the sport cars. It was covered with bullet holes. The car was still on, but drifting as if no one was stepping on the gas. I reversed and drove past it. I tried looking inside, but it was tinted. I could feel a drag on my steering wheel, a very severe one. The indicator on the dashboard shows my rear tires were blown. I kept driving on. The engine of the car was now rattling. The car was overheating, and the rattle became louder as I kept moving. Now the car was only braking. The noise in the engine stopped, and it was no longer accelerating. The road ahead was completely empty. Finally, the car came to a complete halt. I shouted, "Fred, let's get into the bushes until help comes." But Fred said nothing. He was still bent with his head between his knees. I pulled his head up. It was then I noticed he was bleeding from 3 different areas on his chest. His eyes were still open in shock. I felt dead. I had no hope. I didn't run. I just sat back in shock. There was no point running. I waited patiently for my fate. I was tired, very tired. I was finding it hard to breathe. My eyes were becoming heavy. I had to close them. I opened my eyes to find myself in the hospital. I asked the nurse where I was, and she said 45 minutes away from Delta State. I asked for my phone, but I was told I was brought in without anything. No phone, no wallet, no bags, nothing. I asked about Fred, but the nurse said I was the only one brought in. It was then I realized I had spent 2 days unconscious at the hospital. Oh my parents, my uncle, everyone expecting me. I borrowed another patient's phone to call my uncle. He told me the horror that they've been through and how the whole family was devastated. In a few hours, my parents and family were all present with me in the hospital. They were crying, praying, and praising God. I was physically present, but my mind was not there. All I could think of was getting across to Fred's family. I really do not know what or how I would tell his wife. Fred's family were not interested in anything I wanted to say or offer. I was not even allowed to see his wife. I am back in the States. I still get nightmares about the trip. As it is almost the anniversary of this tragedy, I decided to come out and say something. Maybe it would reduce my guilt. Maybe I'll be able to sleep better. Maybe hope would return.